There we go. Let's do the news. I wish I could have started this a bit earlier, but the repairman was here for several hours, and so I was not able to do the news while he was doing his repairs. Let's do the news. There's a lot of big stories that are coming out, so I'm going to have a few of these videos, and I'm going to try to keep the video short because there's going to be like 3 of them. But one of the big news spots, Finland and Sweden are going to join NATO apparently. Turkey was given whatever they needed to be given in order for Erdogan to approve of the membership. And so the question really did become, well, what is Erdogan going to get? Now, up to this point, he has been somewhat resistant to doing so. But again, people were basically floating the idea that all things being equal, Erdogan had a list of things that he wanted to accomplish. And I believe he even made a point of saying, this is a time for private conversations. Well, they're in Madrid at the NATO summit. So apparently those private conversations took place, and they gave Erdogan any and everything that he basically wanted, including the YPG and the PKK. So we'll see. I mean, when I was talking back and forth with Leif, he was basically saying that they've okayed Turkey's incursion into Syria. Desperation, man. Desperation. But in this very particular situation, desperation on a whole different front. Take the Turkey side out of it. The West is screwed. They have found themselves in an irreconcilable situation. And I would call it nothing short of apocalyptic. All things being equal, our economies, especially the modern economies, run on energy. Now, what happens to an economy when the cost that you're paying for energy spikes? What happens to an economy if you can't even get your hands on that energy in the first place? Or the new energy is so much more dramatically expensive that your ability for manufacturing, your ability for heating, the ability for your population to even to be able to afford things like heat, or to afford things like going on vacation, or just a tax in general that population is now having to pay. A policy, all of that stuff is related specifically to energy. Anything that you are doing on some level requires the use of energy. Even the baby formula thing. I mean, for them to create the baby formula requires energy. For them to ship it, meaning get it to the airport, for it to go on an airplane, for it to get in your car, to get from point A to point B, even the equipment that has to make the baby formula, in order to build that equipment requires energy. Energy is all throughout their process. And the moment that you add an additional cost to that energy, everything else goes up. Part and parcel to the issue associated right now with inflation is oil and gas, basically energy. The West decided they wanted a sanction war with Russia. Okay, fair enough, you got your sanction war. The West decided that they wanted to basically provoke a conflict as opposed to having some kind of rational negotiation on the framework or security framework of Europe. Okay, fair enough, you got that. They decided they didn't want to fulfill the Minsk Accords, or for that matter, they wanted to expand it. Fair enough. You decided to take provocative action. This is the result of that provocative action, meaning this invasion in Ukraine. On top of that, you decided you wanted a sanction war, and you decided that you were going to basically sanction everything with the exception of energy. Russia turns around and says, okay, fair enough. We will continue to fulfill the contracts. By the same token, you got to pay us in rubles. You stole our cash, which, what happened? Increased the cost of the ruble, for one, meaning it solidified the ruble. But on top of that, the price of gas, energy, shot up. Well, China, India starts to buy Russian gas, energy products in mass, in bulk. The price of energy goes up to the point where Russia has like $100 billion or something like that just in oil reserves. It's obscene in regards to the amount of money that they've been able to get hand over fist as a direct result of Western action. And so whereas China, India, other countries are going to get cheaper fuel for their economies, Europe is going to be paying more. And that's assuming it can find suppliers to replace it at all. This is, like I said, nothing short of apocalyptic. Go back to the very beginning where the conversation came up where they were talking about German industry, and German industry was basically saying, we cannot survive without fuel. We just can't. How can our factories run? For that matter, how can people even afford the products that they're going to buy from us with the marked upcharge that they would have to pay as a result of that? And so just so happened, the country that all of you declared this kind of economic war on is the country that supplies you with a vital resource, that specific vital resource that you can't do without, that your countries are entirely dependent upon that none of you seem to even consider before taking this particular course of action. And now you're in this comically ridiculous situation where they're admitting to themselves, we're fucked. Yes, I know. Okay, thank you. It's that. For the longest time, I kept saying, how are you going to resolve this? Where are you going to get the additional fuel from? And Biden had been sending envoys. He himself is going to talk to MBS, basically begging him to increase the amount of fuel they produce. He was begging OPEC to increase the amount of fuel they produce. Even going to Maduro. And this is after pretending Maduro wasn't leading that country for the last several years. This is after trying to whack Maduro. Even begging Venezuela, or for that matter, trying to get the Iran deal done in order to get Iran's oil on the market. Well, Iran's oil is already on the market. I guess the point that I'm making here is they are not finding an out to this particular situation. And the desperation is increasing. And the conversations that they're having amongst themselves gets that across. I'm going to give you the hat mic conversation between Joe Biden and Emmanuel Macron that makes it very clear that the issue associated with oil and gas has no out. There's no out. There's no door in order to get out of that particular situation. And even the things that Biden is thinking of, meaning Qatar or OPEC, the door's shut. Welcome to the Soapbox. Hey, I'm here at Mount Shasta. We're at the UFO convention. We're Skywalker. Hey, I'm here at Mount Shasta. I'm totally going to have to fix that in editing. That did not go well. But my name is Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Soapbox. If you guys dig this content, like, share, and of course subscribe. You can also support the content with super chats. I'm going to try to keep this video relatively quick because I have multiple videos that I want to do because there's a lot of news bits that are basically falling out. This one is big though. Biden has been begging, bended knee, trying to find any corner of the world where he can basically get oil energy from. Europe and the US, specifically Europe though, has gotten itself into a quandary that they basically decided to have an economic war against a country that is controlling a vital resource that they themselves needed for the very basis and operation of their particular countries. Why on earth did you believe that Russia would stand by, A, as you steal their reserves, B, as you decide that you don't want them to use your currency in the various banks, meaning you wanted to basically take the oil for free, on the gas for free. Why would you think that they would basically stand by there and do that? And more interesting to the point, all of you have basically said, we're going to move over our energy production. Okay, fair enough. Russia has found other buyers in India and China because, look, it's a vital resource. And if people can get it for cheaper, they're going to get it for cheaper because that, whatever that difference is, meaning in regards to the amount they can save, allows their economies to flourish that much more. So yes, they're going to take the opportunity to do it. The rest of the world is not on board for this. This is a specific issue for the West. Where are you going to get the energy in order to keep your economies running? That's the question. And at this point, Russia was the main supplier. You've decided that you didn't want to get that particular product, even though you need it. Russia has decided to go to other people and sell the product to others. All right. You've decided to dump billions of dollars into Ukraine. You've decided to dump weapons, munitions, logistics. We just found out they're commandos. Of course, I think I said earlier beforehand that we had Americans on the ground, but either way, they've admitted to having commandos on the ground. NATO is basically at war with Russia. Real terms. Why would Russia and Moscow continue to supply you a resource, a vital resource that allows your economies to function and tick along normally as those economies produce weapons, munitions, cash that is given to Ukraine to kill other Russians? Why do you believe they would do that? And herein lies the ridiculousness of Western policy, that it seems as if they never just took the second step of what happens if we do X or what happens if we do Y. And now we're basically seeing them in a whirl of shit and piss as a direct result of not asking that very specific question. What happens if we go this particular course? How are we going to find a way to make up the gap in the various energy reserves? And shouldn't these be conversations, or shouldn't these have been conversations that you had before taking this policy where all of you guys jump off the side of a cliff and then decide you need to build an airplane? It's nonsense. This is out of Reuters. Biden and Macron having a conversation. They're at the G7. The NATO summit is coming up in Madrid. That's starting. In fact, we're going to have Wyatt on tomorrow about it. They're at the G7. Macron leans into Biden right here. Two top OPEC oil producers, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, can barely produce or increase oil production. French President Emmanuel Macron on Monday said he had been told by the UAE's president. Saudi Arabia and UAE have been perceived as the only two countries in the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries with spare capacity to boost global deliveries that could reduce prices. Quote, I had a call with MBZ. Macron was heard telling Joe Biden on the sidelines of the G7 summit, using the shorthand Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Quote, he told me two things. I'm at a maximum, meaning production capacity. That is what he claims. And then he said the Saudis can increase by 150,000 barrels a day, maybe a little bit more, but they don't have huge capacities before 6 months. Before 6 months. A statement from UAE's top energy official comes out, quote, in light of the recent media reports, I would like to clarify that the UAE is producing near to our maximum production capacity based on its current OPEC and production baseline. Again, this was Energy Minister Susil bin Mohammed Al Muzuril. And let's keep going. With oil supplies that have been steadily rising in recent months due to a shortage in supply, rebound in demand from the worst coronavirus epidemic, prices have risen further since Moscow invaded Ukraine in February. Well, it wasn't the invasion in and of itself that increased the prices. It was the sanctions war that the West decided that it wanted to basically throw after provoking a conflict in Ukraine in the very first place. And again, I go back to William Burns' memo, Niet means Niet, director of the CIA, where he's describing everything that is taking place right now in regards to the situation with Ukraine. And he did it with almost a God-like point of view. But it's not that. It was infinitely rational. These guys just leaned into it and continuously provoked the conflict. Okay, fair enough. You decided economic war. Okay, fair enough. You decided you wanted to sanction a vital resource for your economies. Okay, fair enough. How are you going to replace it? And this conversation gets across that they have no idea. They have no clue. Add to that they're already burning through their reserves. They're already going through their reserves. Add to that Nord Stream 1 has cut the amount of gas that it's delivering to Germany by 60%. 60%. So not only are they going through their reserves, Germany, at this point, has started to freak out. And they've started to implement emergency energy strategies. Here's the rub. Despite the fact that 60% less is going to Germany, the amount that they've been making off of it has gone up. Because as the demand increased, so did the price. So despite the fact that the volume is not necessarily the same, the amount that they're making off of it is astonishing. It's astonishing. So a sanctions war in order to gut and decimate Moscow. The stated objective, we are trying to destroy the Russian economy. That backfires to all of these economies or these countries with double-digit inflation, stagflation, staring them in the face, and in this very specific situation, a vital resource that their economies need just to operate in and of itself, they're having whispered conversations that there's no way to resolve it. This is irreconcilable. To get across how bad this is, Europe is thinking about energy rationing at this point. Germany is talking about restarting coal plants. And for whatever abilities that these guys have for basically not getting Russian energy, they're still getting Russian energy. If you buy and get it from let's say a third supplier, if the original supplier got it from Moscow, then just because the flag changed on it in between, two waypoints, it's still the same gas or same oil. Also, to make it worse, that means they're paying an extra charge on the same oil. So instead of just saying, okay, I'm going to take it for the years, thank you, here's cash, it becomes, I'm going to take it from a third supplier that is going to have a markup on it. Not just the inflation pressures in and of itself, but the amount that the person is going to get for selling it to me in the first place. You're paying for that. You're paying for that. And so are your constituent your populations. This is astonishing. How do you explain this to your populations? I'm fascinated with that question. How do you justify the damage that you are doing to your local populations? How do you justify that? How do you justify the amount of attention and time, resources that you've basically devoted to Ukraine while the people in your various countries suffered as a result of the policies that you yourselves have been taking? How do you explain that to them? How do you justify that? And I suppose the fact that Macron lost his government majority to Mélenchon, who basically is NATO skeptical, I suspect there's going to be political destabilization in those various countries. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I legitimately believe there's going to be political destabilization in Europe as a direct result of what they are doing now, as those populations are angry and vengeful that they have to ration energy, that they have to be colder, that they have to buy less food products, or that they're paying more money for those food products. Look, if you are Bojo, or if you're Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, do you honestly believe that the inflation that we're experiencing is in any way impacting what you would typically buy or what you would typically do? And the answer, of course, is no. And that's the rub. The various people who you're looking at on media, the various people who are making decisions like this, those people are not entirely overtly affected by the decisions that they're making in this very specific capacity. All of us are. And so when they decide they want to be neocons and they take certain policy, we are the ones that are now suffering as a result of the policies that they have been taken. All of these policies have been provocative. None of them needed to take place. None of them. They have a question. How are you going to replace your energy, bro? Right here. With European utilities forced to tap reserves intended to cover needs for the winter, government controls of gas distribution could start within months. If Russia completely shuts off the main link, the region could run out of supplies by January, according to a consultant with Wood Mackenzie. Now, Russia, like I said, cut gas supplies by 60%. They said that it was sanctions, that they needed to get some kind of part, some kind of turbine from Canada, and because of the sanctions, they weren't able to get them. Whether it's true or not, who knows? Who cares? Doesn't matter in the least. You decided that you wanted to have an economic war to destroy the Russian economy where people would rise up and throw Putin out of Moscow. That's what you wanted. That was your stated objective. So to turn around now and say they're declaring an economic war against us. That's what Germany is saying. Economic war. Think about that. Think about how ridiculous that is. Economic war. That's what Germany is saying. They're screaming. Ah! When we decided to have an economic war against you, we had no intention that you were going to respond in kind. Maybe you should have thought about that. They're freaked out. They're going through their reserves. They're at the point of considering rationing. The coal plants are basically, they're coming up with a strategy to potentially even bring those back on. And this comes out. Nord Stream pipeline need to be switched off for 10 days. 10 days. And of course, Germany's concern is, are they going to cut it back on? Are they going to cut it back on? Now, the West is coming up with a cockamamie scheme of price caps, which is going to be dead on arrival. I'm going to explain that in the next video. But all things being equal, they're saying the quiet part out loud to themselves. We have no way out. Saudi Arabia can't increase it to the degree that we need to, nor can they decrease it at the speed that we need to. And if Russia decides to shut the pipes off now, which they will be shut off for 10 days at least, what does Europe do? Does Russia even have an incentive at this point? They have other suppliers. They're building the infrastructure necessary for those other suppliers to be able to get their products, not to mention about Bode and everything else. And so could they live with Europe not getting gas for? Yes. Yes, of course. They have a huge amount of reserves at this point, and they have other people who want to buy their products. And all things being equal, Europe, if they buy it from third parties, are probably still going to end up getting Russian oil or gas anyway. But I'm going to end this here. I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, I'm going to say subscribe. These guys are living in a room full of mirrors, and they have no answer to this at all. No answer. And like I said, from the standpoint of industry in Germany, oh man, it is apocalyptic. If that gas stops and they basically start using their reserves, and they hit the winter months without anything in their reserves, or at the very least not sufficient to get through the winter, what do they do? Europe is going to be poorer and colder as a direct result of their policies. And they are going to have to explain that to their local populations every bit as much as Biden is going to have to explain it here. And in the same way, I don't think that's going to fly here, considering his poll, 39% or something. I have a hard time suspecting that them, European leaders following around the 39 polling percentage person in the United States, I have a hard time believing that they're going to be able to do it. Like, share, and of course, subscribe.